Good morning. I'm English and I speak bad Norwegian and even worse Swedish. So hopefully you guys don't mind if I present to you in English today. We're just going to start here. I got told about a decade ago, when you do presentations, show a picture of your family and then the audience empathize with you and they listen. Does it work? It does, doesn't it? It works every time. But this is where I kind of tell you about me a little bit. The important part is, of course, this part. I have my Norwegian wife and my 3 kids, and little Max is just 5 months old at the moment. I'm from London, and I've been in Norway and Oslo for 5 years. I've worked for 15 years within marketing advertising. I started in the classic reklama at Publicis. I got quite bored quickly of the big machine making ads, and I kind of felt I can't believe like these 30-second TV commercials are going to work for much longer. So I kind of followed to East London. You went to the world of digital, and then as social started coming alive, sort of the late 2000s, I started tapping into there, and wherever there was real engagement, and I was always looking for the new. And then, of course, I met a Norwegian girl, and then I had to come over to Norway. And then I found the JCP setup very interesting because we started tapping into the world of live and engagement and of reality, which is where I believe marketing is. I've won multiple awards over the last 10 years, London, New York, Sweden, Norway. And I'm continuing myself to try and push forward with what I think modern marketing is and what we think at JCP we believe in. So the seminar today is Experience the Message, Why Experiential Works. And I'm going to come back in a moment and explain what the definition, or what we believe the definition of experiential marketing is. We're going to go through 3 simple things today. We're going to start with you guys, which is about the challenges. Then we're going to look at the opportunities, and then how to make the most of it. So, like all good marketing, it should always start with your audience. Now, I'm not exactly sure what every single one of you do, but I would have thought and would have hoped to have thought you deal with brands and audiences some way or another. And it is an incredibly challenging time for marketing managers, for brand managers, for CMOs. And that's just the fact. The game has completely changed of what used to be marketing, what used to be communication. But you yourselves in this room and others that I've spoken to around Scandinavia and other clients that I meet are absolutely not alone. This is a company called State of Inbound, who do large-scale marketing surveys across the world for all different CMOs and marketing managers. And they ask a number of questions every year. This was last year's. We're still waiting for this year's to come out. And I picked up one of these questions, which is, what are your company's top marketing challenges? And it's quite a broad question, but when I was looking through these results, I kind of wasn't surprised of what the actual answers were. What you can see at the top, generating traffic and leads, proving the ROI of our marketing activities. Now, what I take from that is, I can't get anyone to click on anything or listen to anything or look at anything. And my boss, my board, wants to know where every single penny of my money is going. These are genuine, very hard challenges. And the reason why is businesses have a real business problem at the moment, because disengagement has become a major issue. Fundamentally, and the statistics prove it, audiences are just dropping off from branded content, full stop. Of course things work, of course things move forward, but it's just becoming tougher and tougher. And I use 2 very obvious examples here of that. We start with ad block. Ad block today, and it sounds kind of small, but the arrow's pointing up. Ad block on mobile devices globally has hit over 700 million downloads. So at this moment in time, there's 700 million people in the world who have actively made a decision. I never, ever want to see an ad from a company again on my mobile device which I spend a ridiculous amount of time looking at. So we've heard about AdBlock, and I have it on. And to be honest, most of the people in my agency have it on, and these are all ad people. They hate it because the ads get in the way of the content they actually want to watch. And that moves on to the second thing. I use Netflix as an example. You as your consumers, so when I talk about consumers, I'm talking about us. We now just have control over whatever content we want to watch whenever we want to watch it. So in terms of this idea of like a linear TV, in terms of this idea of this disruption of just being there, you just don't need to anymore. And why would you choose to? Why would you choose to look at something you don't have to look at or you don't want to look at? And we have all the ability to be able to do that. Google now sees specifically when people are watching linear TV, for example, they show a spike in search traffic when the ads come on. They see it, they've shown it, these huge bars, and that's from the US. They go whoop, they go up. It could be a big TV show, ads come on, the reaction goes like this. Straight down, and it's search. And the data is there, and I know it's a lot of the ad world, the communication world, the marketing world have been talking about this for a long time, but now there's a worry. Now things are changing for people. And there's a big struggle that's come from this, especially for marketeers, which is making that job really difficult. This is called the Marketing Landscape Super Graphic. I can't remember the name of the guy that actually made it. But what he has done is laid down every single avenue that marketeers, brands, CMOs have to deal with when they want to run a marketing campaign. It used to be relatively straightforward. You come up with a catchy ad and it makes everyone laugh. You pay a media agency an absolute fortune, and then they just like put it out. And everyone goes, oh, brilliant. Brilliant, look at that. And now, if you just look at advertising and promotion, we need to think mobile marketing, we need to think display and programmatic, we need to think search and social, native and content, video advertising, print PR. That's just advertising and promotion. Then let's move over to content and experience. We need mobile apps, video marketing, email marketing, interactive content, content marketing, optimization, marketing optimization, CMS web experience. Then there's social and relationship. Then there's commerce and sales. Then there's all the data, then there's all the management. And these little blocks in here, these are all the tools that have been created to manage it. So for me, this is an industry somehow trying to catch up with the consumer behavior because they don't know where they're moving. So we're just making more tools, more channels, and more ways to try and communicate to people. And even more interestingly, the same guy that made this has been making this graphic since 2011. 2011, 150. 2017, 5,000. So that quickly, we've kind of just gone a bit crazy. I don't know what to do. Make more channels, make more tools, get the computers to get them. It's kind of exploded to a point, and it's making your job incredibly difficult. It's like, well, where do I go now? And that idea of return on investment is becoming a genuine issue to the point, and not to seem too negative about this, that CMOs are losing their jobs. This was a really interesting quote from Forbes. This was based in 2017. And it says here, the first half of 2017 saw the highest level of CMO departures and arrivals since the study began in 2012. The complexity of the role and acumen required to be a modern marketing leader is challenging many CMOs to meet increased expectations. So Forbes have ran this study, and what it went on to talk about in this article is the basics of a company, a brand, a service. Not many other things have changed. There's a production line, there's management, there's meeting, but the role of the marketing officer has massively changed. It's an incredibly hard job, and now every single thing that you do, every single piece of money, every single krona can be tracked. So you can easily say, well, where did it go? You can connect it all to the bottom line. Hence the reason in the US, which of course is incredibly cutthroat, they're just spinning around. And it went even further, which I haven't put up here. Recently, Coca-Cola and Unilever have scrapped the CMO position altogether. A chief marketing officer no longer exists in Coke, and it no longer exists in Unilever. It's now called a chief growth officer. So because companies need growth, literally, you're hearing about lots of companies falling off the board because we're having an industry shift, literally. So companies are looking for growth and they're looking for other opinions because what they're seeing from the chief marketing officer, the classic training of very expensive big campaigns with spikes that drive in, are fundamentally not working. And that is why Coke and Unilever have changed the way they're directing how they're going to do that business. So the question is, why is this happening? Why does it seem to be so tough to create communications? And it's called the attention economy. Like everything and what I spoke at the beginning, all of this is to do with the audience that we're trying to communicate, to engage with, to change behavior, to sell to. Everything's about them. And the attention economy is a term coined by a man called Matthew Crawford, who basically suggests that attention is a resource and a person only has so much of it. There's only so much you as a human being can actually physically take in. So The Economist spoke about this, Harvard Business Review have spoken about this. This time we're living in is this attention economy. There's none left in our minds to be able to give any attention to anything else. And this comes from an example of what the average consumer has today. The average consumer has 3 to 4 connected devices, 7 social media accounts, and spends an average of 2 hours on them. Now, this is the average. When you start looking at the charts, it takes a little bit to spike up. And when you say the average, I'm talking a bit more middle age. If you start dropping down to that youthful audience that every brand wants to go to, you need to double and treble that number. And you need to double that number. They're just there the whole time. And what's actually a marketing firm, Yankelevich, who do a lot of research, they have stated that in the 1970s, we were kind of subdued to about 500 different marketing messages, whether you kind of knew it or not. That's what was going into your mind. And today we're on about 5,000. It's about 5,000 different messages are going into your mind each day. And you can understand why that attention, our attention, is becoming a resource and it's dwindling and it's becoming harder and harder. And it's actually had an effect on the makeup of our minds. Because apparently humans have a shorter attention span than goldfish, thanks to smartphones. This was a study done by Microsoft Corporation in Canada. They took 2,000 people. I can't remember the details of how they did the study, but they identified that humans used to have an attention span of about 12.2 seconds, I think it was. Now it's dropped down to about 8.7 seconds. Goldfish is about 9. And that actual study got questioned a little bit how it was, but I don't think you need a study to kind of take this meme instead, which is like the truth. I would suggest that most of you, as soon as I've stopped talking, you get out of that room, you're just going to get that phone and look and just check who's emailed me and what's happened and I got a like, and it will feel good because it's physical now, how it's actually working. It is physically releasing endorphins into your brain, which is making you feel happy when you're looking at the screen. It's a scary side, but this is all connecting. This is the attention economy. This is why no one's looking at anything, because you're looking at everything constantly. This is why ad block is up. This is why people aren't engaging, because you choose to look at what you want. And this is the effect it's having in terms of communication. This is the ADA marketing model. Classic ad model has been used for 60 years, still pretty much used today, more or less. You go through this funnel. It starts with attention, which is the cognitive stage. Then you go to interest and desire. This is the affective stage. Oh, I'd like that. Then you move to action, which is buy that. The problem that the attention economy has caused is that this just doesn't work anymore because it's so hard to get that. And you need to just get that attention and that interest to then even be able to drive these other two. So it's up here where we're actually having the problem. So we need to rethink how we actually look at this model. So that's quite a dark morning as I've started. Everything's terrible. There's nothing we can do, and we should all find new jobs. But, of course, which is why we're here, funnily enough, it's what we're interested in, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And this is called the participation age. It's coined with like a few different terms. I think it was Google who are owning this particular term. But how we actually look at it, and how I think Google are looking at it as well, is there's kind of three main phases within marketing, full stop. The first phase was the industrial age. That's the product-centric art of persuasion. That's the classic Mad Men era. That's some really smart guys making some really smart ads, and everyone believes if I buy that suit and I buy that car, I'm going to be that person. Then we shifted over to marketing 2.0, quite a big shift. I'm not going to detail every single moment. The information age. This is the internet. Customer-centric, highly targeted. And I think too many brands are actually still here. What we kind of have just done is taken the same thinking from there, and now we're just targeting it really specifically. Now we're just saying, okay, instead of going really broad, I can target it. But where we are now, or where brands should be, is the participation age, which is much more relationship-based, and which is much more about experience and engagement, not just targeting a broadcast message, but actually getting your audience to build a relationship with, to experience something, to be part of, to have a conversation with. So, strangely, within this attention economy, there's kind of been this contrast of this participation age, because although it's getting harder and harder to engage, when you do, something's happening now that never happened before, is if you do it correctly, consumers will actually actively promote your brand. You've seen it a number of times. You have the classic, oh, that was viral. But now, if there's something that you like, if there's something you are engaged with, they will push it out. They will actually talk about it. And they don't sit back and kind of just look at it. They go, I'm interested in that. I want to do that. And we're going to look at a couple of brands who have actually done that. And there's a reason why this participation works so well for brands. In fact, there's two reasons why. The first one is you're not interrupting, you're asking. This was just a classic moment of Kanye. He's gone like way off the hill from this point. This was like a good time for him when he did this. But you're not interrupting. Ads are disruptive. They get in your way. They're trying to push in front of you. When you do something within participation, you're saying, would you like to be part of this? And then if you're saying, would you like to be part of this, it needs to be interesting. And for something to be interesting, you need to put your audience first and your brand second. And that is a really big part of experiential, and it's a really big part of how to actually manage a brand now. Too many brands, and brands that I still work with today, go, but this is my brand. I have to say it like this, I have to be like this. And it's like, no, put the audience first. What are they interested in? What do they like? What gets them going? Because they're going to look at those things. Fit your brand to the audience, not the audience to the brand. It has to work that way to be relevant and to be interesting. And when you want to create participation, you have to put the audience first. What would they like? How would they like to be evolved? And of course, at every point, you can connect it to your brand, product, or service. So I just want to jump now to the definition of experiential marketing. It's kind of called a couple names, experiential, engagement, or participation marketing. But simply put, it's a way to create authentic, memorable experiences with an active involvement between brands and consumers. It's kind of simple, but it's still a bit of a mouthful. I think we can do it better next time. But the important part is authenticity, which we're going to talk about, and memorable experiences, something that stays with you, and an active involvement. And that active involvement doesn't necessarily have to be live in the streets. We're going to show you some sides of things. But the active involvement is why you remember, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And this idea of experiential is not new. It's been around for a long time. Red Bull have built their entire marketing strategy off experiential, and they've done it for 20 years. That's how they've done what they've done. It's all experiential. Nike, the mainstay of it is experiential. People experience that brand. That's a Nike store, ultimately. It's not a store, it's experiential marketing. But as you can see, these are a few marketing magazines from the UK and the US. Agencies everywhere see experiential marketing as the next big thing and brands want in. Pull, don't push. Don't miss out on experiential marketing's unfair advantage. Why experiential is the heart of brandings. Brands need to create a human connection with consumers. What marketeers can learn from participation brand. A new study reveals how participation brands are successfully designing content and experiences to suit modern consumers' lives. So I wouldn't call it a trend because it's been around for so long. It's just the fact that people are figuring out, I think we need to get real with our potential customers and we need to think experience and not ads. So the question is, why does it work? So what we have here at JCP is our 4 pillars of experiential. And as you can see here, we call this experiential thinking, not necessarily experiential marketing, because this is a mindset when you're going into something. You're thinking more about a brand experience rather than a classical sort of ad campaign. How can I get someone to experience it? And there's 4 key pillars, what we believe, for experiential thinking. Authenticity, FOMO, fear of missing out, participation, of course, as we spoke about, and UST, which is unique storytelling. What I'm going to do now is take you through each pillar and kind of show you how it works, showing you some cases as well, some really cool cases. Some are from abroad in the US, and some are from ourselves as well. So we start with authenticity. Incredibly important point, authenticity within your marketing. And ultimately, that is about communicating honestly, being genuine and real, not artificial, and acting with integrity. There's a default reaction to most advertising where it's like you're trying to sell me something, which of course it is. But now it's become, okay, where's the cheat into it? But when you add something that has much more authenticity, a reality to it, there's a believability. And as Harvard Business Review says, if you embrace authenticity, your customers will do your marketing for you by becoming your best brand ambassadors because they trust you. So they actually look at it. And I want to show you a case which is a wonderful use of experiential thinking and I believe a wonderful use of authenticity. Now this is a buggy company called Contours, and they're much smaller than the other buggies in the US, but they believed they had a far superior product, but they didn't have anywhere close to the marketing budgets of others. So they used experiential thinking to be able to get this across. Like all good communications, and this hasn't changed forever, and it never will change, everything is still about insight. Everything is still about human connection. The other ways to do it is kind of how you execute it. And within this idea, they're saying we've got the smoothest ride in this buggy. But their insight was the fact that, well, babies can't talk to tell us if it's good or not. So how would we actually ever know? Now that's a wonderful insight, and you could use that and execute that in many, many different ways. And in this instance, they chose experiential.
Parents all want what's best for their babies, but when shopping for strollers, they don't always know what's best. The Contour stroller is designed with total comfort and safety of the baby in mind. But since Contours was outspent by bigger brands, shoppers didn't even know about this premium stroller option. How could we get them to consider it? We landed on a valuable insight. Parents want to give their babies comfort, but comfort is something babies can't describe. So we created a first-of-its-kind product demonstration at Bye Bye Baby to help their shoppers make a more informed decision.
Feels like a smooth ride, but that's all speculation, right? You don't know because you're not the baby.
I know.
You're not a baby in a stroller.
Right.
Introducing the Baby Stroller Test Drive by Contours. We built an exact adult-sized replica of one of our best-selling baby strollers and invited shoppers to try it.
Here comes some signs. Ooh, that's the sign.
Then we turned the demonstration into content for social media, where stroller shoppers look for help to make their pre-purchase decisions.
Are you comfy? Yes, I am. Are you cozy? So I'm here with Gabe, who's taking a stroller ride himself.
Yeah, comfy. We can do this all day long.
Cozy, right? Yeah, it's very cozy.
It's very comfortable.
I love it. How's it feel in there? Comfortable? It's very comfortable. Yeah, it's cozy. How's it feel in there? Comfortable? Twinkle, twinkle, little.
That's really nice.
Are you getting more confident?
I am.
Peekaboo!
It's cozy, right? Have you ever seen a kid in a stroller and thought, that looks like a pretty sweet ride. I wish I had that. One company is now doing just that. Check it out.
We got stroller shoppers to consider contours and pushed sales higher than ever.
The baby stroller test ride by Contours proves what babies have known all along, but just couldn't say.
And we showed that with the right idea, a small baby brand can make an adult-sized impact.
So going back to that word authentic, when it's authentic, then there's a believability to it. You know, within this instance, it was like, okay, this is real. They've made this sits there. When you have the believability, then you can get the entertainment level in. And that's what we're all looking for when we're searching through things, is some form of entertainment. And then we start getting the trust. And what I know about this campaign now is, this is when you could start advertising after this. You've now gained some trust. You can retarget, you can push an advert. They now have a believability. And that's why the ROI was so high there. That entire campaign budget for these guys, and this is in for the whole of the US, was $55,000 all in for absolutely everything. And they had a huge return on investment for what they got there. And you saw a lot of PR and you saw a lot of social work. That is an incredibly common thread when you're creating experiential, and we'll talk about this a little more. So then we jump into FOMO, fear of missing out. This is a really cool pillar for brands, because what it gives is urgency. And urgency is what all brands kind of want. It's like, no, you need to look at this now. Because again, going back to this attention economy, when you're kind of flicking through things, what you decide to stop at, what you decide to look at, if you can add a bit of urgency to it, if you can get this thought of, oh, hang on, there's something happening now that I might miss out on, that FOMO, then that's a real clear way to be able to cut through and have a look at. And of course, there needs to be a strong interest to it. And we're going to use a case from Nike to explain this. That last campaign that I showed you, as I said, was $55,000. I can promise you, this is not $55,000. This is far, far from that. But I want to make a point, as I said before, Nike have been using experiential as a foundation of marketing for years. Although the Nike and the running with Apple and iPod, they recently created the connected jersey. They've created a number of different runs and experience activities that have gone on continuously. And these experiences they give their customers is why they've stayed so loyal for so long. But back to this particular case, ultimately, what this is all about is just an advert for this new shoe called the Fly-Zin. But it's brought to life with experiential. And it's called Breaking 2.
Two records have redefined the sport of running. Breaking the 4-minute mile in 1954 and breaking the 10-second barrier in the 100 meters in 1968.
The 10-second barrier has been pierced.
The sub-2-hour marathon is running's last remaining barrier, and it's a big one. It's considered humanly impossible. Most experts think we're decades away from running that fast for that long. But against all odds, Nike went for it. We'd be lying if we said we knew from the start how big Breaking 2 would get. We didn't know the live webcast would keep millions of people around the world glued to their screens. Some even stayed up through the night, just to see if Kipchoge would do it. We didn't know people would watch 3 men running in circles for 2 straight hours. Or that the internet would rally around those 3 men. And that for once, love and support would trend on Twitter. We didn't know Breaking 2 would take off like it did. Hell, nobody did. Despite all the uncertainties swirling around this attempt, we set a course for how Nike could pull it off. We gave their moonshot a name people would remember. And just days before the race, we launched a campaign that put Nike's stake in the ground.
Breaking the 2-hour marathon barrier is impossible.
So, we're doing it.
We collaborated with Dirty Robber, Uncle Toad's Media Group, Facebook, and Twitter to create a multi-platform live stream from scratch.
We are here at the Autodromo Nacional Monza to see if we can break this barrier.
Together we designed a minute-by-minute run of show and all of the interstitial content that kept people engaged for 2.5 hours.
I'm excited, you get excited, let's push these men to greatness today.
2 years in the making to possibly make history.
At the end of the day, we were 25 seconds closer to breaking a barrier they said was impossible. Who knew?
I said it was a bit more expensive. But that idea of urgency, that idea of something happening now, that idea of fear of missing out. And although, as I said, that's a big campaign, that's Nike, that's millions of dollars, we ourselves have done a similar thing for TV2 in Norway. And I can promise you, we don't have anywhere close to the budgets. So I want to get across that you can take the same thinking, you can take the same approach of using the authenticity, of using FOMO to be able to reach through. We've been working for 4 years with TV2 on launching the Premier League. So each year, our task is to get subscriptions. But what TV2 in Norway have fundamentally seen is their limited audience who they can then reach with TV, which is men 40 plus, and they know who they are and they know how many subscriptions they get. And how TV2 do their audiences, they rate them on a scale of 1 to 7. And 7 is the hardcore, and then you have these 5s and 6s, which are called football interested. They like football and they like the Premier League, but they don't necessarily have a team yet because they're not hardcore fans, but they are potential new customers. The challenge is you cannot reach them with TV and you can't really reach them with advertising. So we created a new concept called Klubbjakten, where we took Helena Olofsson, who now in Norway is a bit of a celebrity, but before she wasn't. And we kind of mirrored the audience's side of things, which is if you don't have a football team yet, how would you go about actually choosing one? So we took Helena to England. She had 10 days, and this was run in real time. She went to all 20 Premier League teams, and it was up to the teams, managers, and fans to persuade her which team to actually pick. And at the end of the 10 days, she needed to say, I am now a supporter. But we left it up to social media to actually choose who she would see. We just mapped out her route in England, but we didn't actually know who was going to go there. We wanted to tap into the people in England and the people in Norway to help us persuade where to go.
A former world champion snowboarder didn't know which Premier League side to follow, so Norwegian television station TV2 decided to lend a helping hand.
To increase Premier League subscriptions this year, TV2 had to reach beyond the hardcore supporters and turn the football interested into football fans. To become a true fan, you need a club to follow. But if you haven't been born into it, how do you pick your team? Introducing the Club Hunt. Over 10 days, clubless Helena Olofsson was sent to England to visit all 20 Premier League clubs. And it was up to the fans, players and club officials to persuade her which team to pick. We left it up to our audience to influence her where to go and what to do. And of course, persuade her themselves by following her on a blog, social channels, TV2 Sports and nightly news. But it wasn't only Norwegian football fans who wanted to help Helena.
I've just got the team for you.
Quite a few Premier League legends joined in as well.
Manchester United,
Newcastle.
Arsenal.
At the end of the 10 days, we truly went beyond the hardcore fans. The campaign had a total reach of 1.5 million people. 20% of our target audience said Klubbjakten made them more interested in English football. Film content alone had over 350,000 views. 225,000 site views with almost 5 minutes in average time spent. And alongside our promotional campaign, we hit 104% of our subscriptions target.
Are you a Leicester fan?
It's very
Crystal Palace? Hello.
Tusen tack.
Yes!
Yeah, Crystal Palace. Bizarre. And actually, this was last season, and she chose them, and I think their first 10 games they lost. We move on to participation, and we've spoken about this a lot, and you can see through all this work how it's engaging the audience on smaller scales and larger scales and events and just through social media. But there's a reason why it's important. This is a pretty famous quote. Some of you may remember it. I knew it, and when I looked for it, apparently it's from Benjamin Franklin. But tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I learn. It's classic. It's how you teach people things. You get involved in it, you actually learn about something. If you tell you just, I forgot what that was. But there's more than just the quote. There's actual science to it. This is what's called the Participation Brand Index. And it's a study done by a company called Iris. Iris are a very large communication network globally. Huge amounts of employees. And they believe in very similar things to us, i.e. participation. So they put together a study of over 16,000 brands and consumers to better understand what it means if you're a participation brand, i.e. if you include your audience in your marketing activities. And as I mentioned, Red Bull, Nike, Heineken, or if you're more of a broadcast band. And the study is quite large. There's a lot of things in there, but there's a couple of points that were really interesting. First of all, this is the NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Again, used globally to actually see when you've done some work, who's a detractor, who actually just doesn't like it, who's a passive, just sits by and goes, yeah, whatever, and who's a promoter. And of course, what we want to do is we want to push everyone into the promoter side of things. And what they saw in the study is that participation brands drive advocacy. It was way higher in the promoters when you were actually bringing people on. And I think you can see that. If it's football fans with Kloppjakten, of course they're going to promote that more than an ad. It's like, look what Helena's doing in London. Have you seen this? Why are they going to go look at that ad trying to sell me something? It's not going to work. Same with Nike. They're going to say, look what's happening today. Same with the buggy. It's going to become a conversation. But from a financial point of view, they saw that participation brands outperformed the market. So they actually looked at the FTSE 100. And they actually saw the brands that had, I think it was over a percentage of 70% participation work, were of a higher standing on the stock exchange consistently for 20 years. Consistently. And to give an example of participation, we want to use another case for ourselves. We work with Volvo as one of our clients, and again, we've worked with Volvo for 3 years. We mainly do this in Norway. This was one of the campaigns for the new V90. And this was a couple years back, and Volvo had a bit of a challenge. Volvo are quite humble with how cool their cars are. And Volvo cars are like crazy cool. But what they had a challenge with is how audiences were perceiving them in terms of being innovative. And that's a big selling point for the people that buy these expensive cars. So they're in competition with Mercedes, with Lexus, with BMW. And a North Star report, which tracks all kind of cars, showed that they were way down the list in terms of when that audience thought of an innovative brand. Although Volvo have been leading innovations for years. Volvo invented the 3-point seatbelt. And then they just gave it away because they're Scandinavian and democratic, and they said everyone should have the 3-point seatbelt. But they've done all these innovations, but they never got anywhere. So with the V90, they really wanted to get this across. And one of the core selling points within Volvo itself is what they call their intelligent technology. And there's a number of features that go underneath this. So for this particular campaign is why we did this.
The Norwegian pre-launched the new Volvo V90. It wasn't so much about you choosing the car, it was more about whether the car would choose you. Volvo is renowned for safety, but now the goal was to communicate their often undersold intelligent technology. So how could we get people to experience the intelligence of this car, packed with world-first innovations, when it's not even available in showrooms yet? I guess you'd have to create a campaign that's as intelligent, innovative, and personal as the car itself. And that's why I was created. Oh, didn't I introduce myself? How rude. Well, I'm V, your artificially intelligent car guide. The way I work is simple. You download me, we get to know each other, and if I like you the most, you win the new Volvo V90.
Hi, I'm V, your artificially intelligent car guide. What's your name?
Dave.
Hi, Dave. Pleasure to meet you. You don't sound like a country boy. Want to see my park pilot assist? It's perfect for the city.
Yeah, sure.
How old are you, Sarah?
I'm 39.
Ah, a 70s child. Things were all a bit analog back then. Let me show you the absolute non-analog future. Autonomous driving. Are you not going to say bless you?
Sorry. Bless you.
Thank you.
But it wasn't all about me. I wanted to get to know you as well. Because like I said, the one person I liked the most would win the V90. And the more we spoke, the better chance you had of becoming the chosen one.
Do you watch Paradise Hotel?
I mean, it's my favorite show, really, so I watch it quite often.
I'm going to go and do something else now.
So, interested in getting to know me? Well, let me tell you. I was released in the App Store April 4th and started thousands of conversations about my innovations, history, and of course, moose in traffic. They're actually a big problem in Scandinavia. I quickly became the #1 downloaded app in Norway, with people spending an average of 30 minutes talking with me. I had 430,000 of my articles being shared across social media. And I was even featured on the front page of the culture section in Norway's largest newspaper. But most importantly, I had formed thousands of personal bonds with people, generating 9,000 leads for the launch of the V90. So there we are. I think I've proved you humans love talking to AI, which is good preparation for when we take over. Bye for now.
What you've seen with a number of these campaigns is the earned media. And I think, as you kind of see this cartoon here, this is what a lot of brands strive for. I would rather be earned media. And there's a reason why. Because then you're becoming part of culture. And that's an incredibly important part of how we should communicate now. How can we be part of the cultural waves that are happening within us? In this instance, it was artificial intelligence, which is why the front page of the culture section of the two wanted to actually make a full double-page spread talking about it, because you're now actually talking about something that's affecting culture itself. And experiential, when done correctly, often gives you that side of things. You saw that with the buggy, with Contour. You saw that with Nike and how that did. And the same with TV2. It was across the English news who were talking about what Norway was actually doing. So we go into the last pillar, which is UST, unique storytelling. Now, marketers have known for 50, 60 years, and all creatives know for 50, 60 years, is decisions are made emotionally. They're not made irrationally. You feel something. You love something. You hate something. This is why you go for it. And our brains are hardwired to take in stories and narratives. That's how they work. There's nothing we can change about it. They've worked from the beginning of time. But marketers have often themselves just retold stories. But UST is about creating unique stories, not just telling them. And what I mean by that is, when we look at the other cases, suddenly there's a completely unique story, completely ownable, about an oversized test buggy for adults. Suddenly there's a completely unique story about breaking the 2-hour marathon. Suddenly there's a completely unique story about a girl going around England trying to find her team and being persuaded to do it. Suddenly there's a completely unique story about the world's first artificially intelligent car guide. And that's an incredibly important part, the uniqueness of the story you get. No one else has it. No one else owns it. It's yours. You're not just retelling another story in a funny way. You're putting something out there completely new. And uniqueness is a huge breakthrough. And I want to use an example here from Cheetos to talk about unique stories. Because we've looked at Volvo, which is a super cool brand, and then we've looked at like football, which is a huge passion point between people. And then of course you've got buggies themselves, which mean so much. When you get something as pointless as a bag of chips, how can you then use experiential and use this unique storytelling to put this across?
I'm Madison Pappel, owner of the Cheetos Abe Lincoln. You can see the two eyes there. And then right there, a little speck, that's where the nose is.
There's a Cheetos museum. I know there is.
There's the little crown, and the torch, in front here, that's where her book would be.
Cheetos that look like King Tut, Cheetos a dolphin, Cheetos Eiffel Tower.
This is my favorite story of the day. How would you like to make money eating Cheetos?
Did you hear that Cheetos is offering $60,000 to anybody who finds a Cheeto that looks like somebody famous?
Your wacky, weird-shaped Cheeto can now earn you up to 60 grand.
Cheetos is calling on people to upload their pictures of Cheetos that are accidentally shaped like something else. The winner will get $10,000. It's a boot. Yes.
It's a Cheeto boot. A Cheetos museum is giving away thousands of dollars.
There is a Cheetos museum.
This guy decided that his Cheeto looked exactly like Harambe.
A Cheeto Harambe?
Sold on eBay for nearly $100,000.
That can obviously only happen in America. But I think quite a few people, and I'm one of those believers, they say like the golden age of advertising or communication is kind of over. But what we think is the golden age of storytelling is just getting started. The stories you can tell now can be so unique and so captivating. For me, it becomes surprising why you wouldn't want to. And again, yes, that's Cheetos and it's a larger budget, but it doesn't really matter about the budget size. They can change. It's just the mindset of when you're going into it. What story do I want to tell? What experience do I want to give my audience with this? And talking about that, because of course we've looked at some large budgets and big American campaigns, us themselves in JCP, we firmly believe in this way of thinking. So much so that we take our own medicine and we implement it for ourselves to promote ourselves. So not too long ago, we changed our logo, our whole identity. It used to be like this, and now it's like this. We did that for the reason because we've evolved from just an event agency to a multi-Nordic communication agency. And when we did it, we wanted to be able to get some attention. We had a goal, how can we kind of get into the press, the trade press, get people to understand that we're moving, we're shifting. So we wrote a brief. And as was mentioned at the beginning, we have creatives across the Nordics in different disciplines, PR and advertising, event and digital. And what we do at the company each quarter is called a creative level up, where all the creatives from the different skill sets in the different countries come together for one day. And it's called a creative shootout. They get split into different groups. So I think there's about 18 of them that can go into groups of 2, can go into groups of 3. And they get given a brief. And they have 7 hours to come up with the idea, deck it up, and present it to the managing directors by 5 p.m. And then one of the ideas gets picked. In this instance, it was this particular brief. How do we make some noise about the fact that we've changed our identity? And this is what we came up with.
I saw an ad for a logo on the internet, and I couldn't believe it.
Vill ni ha mye särskiljande? Notatblokker, ballonger, kaffekopper, penner, gensere, buttons, vi har skilt. Ja, vi har til og med en bil vi kan gi bort. Før vi visste ordet av det, så var vi jo i kontakt med bedrifter fra hele verden. Men så fant vi en kar som var helt spesiell.
I didn't think I would be the winner of this because we are a small car wash in Romania.
It's a good logo. This brought us a lot. Okay.
Today when the car arrives, it's happening. It's a good feeling. JCPs pe loterie, bună ziua!
He got so inspired because he has, and it's official, he changed the name, it's now called JCP Car Wash. He started a new business of branding buses. He has, and I think he's called it JCP branding. He's venturing out. But again, all work and all work that we do, everything has to start with a goal. No goal, no start. Like that has to be what we're trying to achieve. In this instance, it was about us building our brand, about us actually trying to get knowledge out. So we set a goal of getting sort of national press, and we got a call from Norwegian-kampanj. And then about 3 days later, I had a call from Adweek in the US saying they'd seen the film. Can we write an article? And then a few weeks later after that, this is the One Club in New York, which is kind of the biggest award show there is. We got shortlisted for an award there, and they asked if we could have an interview regarding how we actually put it together. So again, in terms of what we reached for ourselves, we surpassed all those goals. Now, in terms of experiential thinking, I'm not here saying you need to just stop marketing and everything you do, but experiential thinking can be a focal point of how you piece things together. Because experiential thinking can affect the PR, can affect the advertising, affect the programmatic, affect the event, the retail, the always on, the content. It's just a way to look at the problems that you guys need to solve for your customers. It's not to say we need to go out and do this big live event straight away. It's about to say, well, actually, should we think about an experience and how that's going to join the dots of our marketing channels? So going back to the beginning where you saw that marketing landscape super graphic and a billion places to do a billion different things, from our side of things, we just need to look at this experience we want to create, and then we can start to build. So we come to the end of the talk, and I have 3 final things to actually talk about, or say 3 points. First of all, have a brand with purpose. I haven't really talked about branding, but if your brand doesn't have a purpose, it doesn't have a mission, it doesn't have something it actually believes in, then nothing's going to work. It's irrelevant. You won't have anything that goes with it. So have a brand with purpose. Secondly, think experience, not ads. It's a bit of a tricky step to start with, but once you start thinking about the experience and not the ads, it changes the way you look at everything. And thirdly, put your audience first. What do they like? What are they interested in? And then attach your brand, your product, your service to what the audience is interested in. And I think Seth Godin says it really, really well. Make things worth talking about. I think when we can look at our different products, services, brands, ads, everything we put out, if you really look at it, you go, is that a bit boring? Like fundamentally, is anyone actually going to notice it? A couple of stats we didn't look at, but in the UK, YouGov looked at the amount of wastage used on ads, and they summed up that they felt £540 billion was wasted on what they call wallpaper, ads that no one's going to look at. And ultimately, what we believe is captivate people. And that's what I have for today. So thanks for your time.